In the early 1960s, Ford Motor Company was at the top of the American market. Their cars were everywhere, from Detroit to Los Angeles, from New York suburbs to Texas highways. Ford was a household name. They made cars for families, trucks for workers, and Mustangs for the young crowd. But one thing was missing: respect in the world of racing. On the other side of the Atlantic, Ferrari had turned itself into the very definition of racing excellence. Enzo Ferrari, the Italian mastermind, was obsessed with building race cars. He wasn't interested in selling millions of vehicles. For him, racing was life. And year after year, Ferrari dominated Le Mans, the most brutal 24-hour race on Earth. For Europeans, Ferrari was a symbol of speed, style, and victory. For Americans, it was a constant reminder that Europe ruled racing and America was nowhere. Henry Ford II, the man running Ford at the time, wanted to change that. He had inherited the company from his grandfather's empire, but he wanted his own legacy. Winning at Le Mans would make Ford more than just a car company. It would make them legendary, and so he made a bold move: buy Ferrari. The negotiations were serious. Ford sent lawyers, accountants, and engineers to Italy. They poured millions into preparing the deal. At first, Enzo Ferrari agreed. He saw Ford's money as a way to expand, but then came the catch. The contract said that Ferrari's racing division, his heart and soul, would be controlled by Ford. Enzo exploded. He threw the papers on the table and stormed out. He famously insulted Henry Ford II, saying Ford built ugly little cars and that they would never understand racing. That humiliation burned into Henry Ford II's pride. Back in Detroit, he gathered his team and declared, "We're going to build a race car, and we're going to beat Ferrari at Le Mans." But building a car to survive Le Mans was not like building a family sedan. Le Mans was a monster. 24 hours of high-speed driving on dangerous roads, with cars racing day and night through rain, darkness, and exhaustion. Engines blew up, brakes failed, drivers collapsed. Ferrari had mastered it. Ford hadn't even tried. So Ford hired experts. They turned to a small British outfit called Lola Cars. Using Lola's design as a base, they created the Ford GT40. It looked sleek, it had power, and Ford poured millions into it. In 1964, the GT40 made its debut at Le Mans. It was a disaster. The cars broke down, engines overheated. Ferrari cruised to victory again. The newspapers mocked Ford. For a company used to success, this was humiliating. But Henry Ford II wasn't the kind of man to back down. Instead of quitting, he doubled the budget. He wanted the best minds in the business. That's when Carroll Shelby entered the picture. Shelby was a Texan with a big personality. He had once been a champion driver, even winning Le Mans in 1959, but a heart condition forced him out of racing. Instead, he built cars. His Shelby Cobra had already made noise in America, combining American muscle with European handling. He knew both sides of the game, and most importantly, he knew how to win. Shelby brought along his trusted driver and engineer, Ken Miles. Miles was brilliant but difficult. He had an unshakable honesty and a stubborn streak that made corporate suits hate him, but behind the wheel, he was magic. He could feel a car's every weakness and every strength. Together, Shelby and Miles began fixing the GT40. They rebuilt the suspension, re-engineered the brakes, tuned the aerodynamics, and stuffed in a monstrous 7-liter V8. The car became faster, stronger, and more reliable. In 1965, Ford returned to Le Mans with the upgraded GT40. Once again, disaster. The cars failed. Ferrari won again. But this time, Shelby and Miles weren't discouraged. They had learned exactly what needed to be done. By 1966, the GT40 was ready. Ford entered Le Mans with not one but 3 cars. The race became a showdown. America versus Italy. Detroit versus Maranello. As the race began, Ferrari surged ahead. But hour by hour, Ford's preparation showed its strength. Ken Miles pushed his GT40 like a man possessed. Through the night, through rain, through exhaustion, he kept building a lead. Ferrari's cars began to break down. By morning, the once invincible Ferrari team was falling apart. With just hours to go, Ken Miles was comfortably in the lead. He had driven nearly flawlessly. Victory was his. Finally, after years of sacrifice, he was about to become a Le Mans champion. But then Ford's executives stepped in. They wanted a perfect publicity stunt. All 3 GT40s crossing the finish line together. A photo for history. They ordered Miles to slow down. Against his instincts, against everything a racer feels in his blood, Miles obeyed. The 3 cars crossed side by side. The crowd cheered. Ford had destroyed Ferrari. Henry Ford II finally had his revenge. But there was a cruel twist. Because of the way the race was timed, another Ford driver was declared the winner. Ken Miles, the man who had carried the dream, was robbed of victory. He smiled for the cameras, but inside, everyone knew the truth. 2 months later, tragedy struck. During a test run of a new GT40, Ken Miles crashed and was killed instantly. He never got the championship he deserved. His story was buried under Ford's headlines. Ford would go on to dominate Le Mans for 4 straight years. The GT40 became a legend. But the real story was more than just trophies. It was about corporate pride, human sacrifice, and the thin line between glory and heartbreak. Even today, when Americans look back at Ford versus Ferrari, it isn't just a racing story. It's a story of revenge, of ambition, and of a man named Ken Miles, who gave everything and got nothing in return. And that's why the legend of Ford versus Ferrari will always be more than cars. It's about people, passion, and the price of chasing greatness.